Hey everybody, welcome to an exciting time in the world of Beatles podcasting. This is Tommy from Blotto Beatles, and I'm here with the rest of the Blottos here. We are hosting kind of a roundtable discussion this evening. We come at you recording this on Sunday, November 28th. I just had to check my calendar on my computer for that actual date. And we've all just finished watching the nearly 9-hour Peter Jackson Get Back documentary. We threw out a line to some of our good pod pals here in the Beatleverse and said, why don't we all get together on this Sunday? We've had a few days to watch this thing and get together and share our initial thoughts, reactions, and whatever else we want to say about this thing. So I don't want to belabor that point too much because it is a work evening and we want to get right down to it. So without further ado, I will introduce you first to the other two Blottos on the call with me, Becker and Scotty. How are you guys this evening?
Hey, what's happening, man?
Pumped to be here.
It's get back time. I got the fever. I got it hard. How are you guys feeling?
I'm good. I didn't watch it as quickly as you guys did. You were like a little bit ahead of me, but I was keeping pace. I watched one an evening, but you guys were watching it during the day.
Yeah, early mornings.
Yeah.
Well, we're serious about this job. And
I woke up one morning and I looked at my phone. It was 5:40 in the morning. And Scotty C had texted, just finished episode 2. I was like, how is that even possible? I think he was trying to beat Sam Wilde at his own game there with the time difference here.
He just saw how hard Glyn Johns was working out there in his fur coats, and he was like, I got to get after this thing right now, you know? Just before we introduce everyone else, one sentence, 2 sentences, what are you guys feeling having walked away from this thing? Any initial reactions?
I loved it. I was a little slow to sort of get super excited about it. I got excited sort of with the Let It Be box coming out and diving into that. Surpassed all of my expectations. Favorite moment, and this footage is pretty, it didn't just come out, but I thought it looked really good. I love George Harrison walking into Apple for the first time. He's like sort of skipping up the stairs. He's just gotten out of his car. He's got an awesome hat. He was like, that scene alone was like my fashion icon for like my 20s. I never attained it whatsoever, but like that look of George was like, that's what I want to look like. Yeah. You guys never let me get away with wearing a hat. I wear like a slightly different hat and everyone's like, Becker's wearing a hat this weekend. What's up with Becker's hat? You know? What about you guys?
I got to say this, my initial question that, there's some recency bias here. I definitely loved this thing. Is this a more definitive statement on who the Beatles are than the anthology?
Yes.
Is the question I'm left asking. And I think because it's so focused in a singular time period and we get so much of that, something I want to talk more about. But that's how much I loved it, that question is coming up in my head right now. Scotty, what about you? Any initial feelings?
Yeah, I definitely loved it. I never seen the Let It Be original one or watched a lot of Beatles stuff. I listened to their music. So it was awesome to see in the, recording, writing, collaborating setting, get to know them a little more as a band, not just instrument wise, but as humans interacting and figuring stuff out. I loved it. I watched every second of it and I'm hanging on.
I wrote down a lot of jumping off points, which I hope will just drive this conversation. For instance, I wrote, Paul has never seen The Wizard of Oz? ?
Oh, good one, right? What the fuck?
Yeah. I have a whole section I want to do on best dressed Beatle that I would definitely like to talk about. And I have some ideas for nominations, for each of them that we can consider, but I'd like to hear everyone else's too. But before we talk about what we're going to talk about, I think we should get the rest of these people on the line.
Absolutely.
Don't you guys?
Yes. Let's get to it.
So we're going to go first with the person who signed on first. We're very, very pleased to welcome the only person, every person here tonight has been on an episode of Blotto Beatles at one time or another, and this is the only person to be on the only lost episode of Blotto Beatles. He runs his own podcast. He does an amazing job out of Canada. It's Ethan Alexanian from the Fans on the Run podcast. Welcome, Ethan.
Okay.
Excellent.
I'm here.
Ethan. Thank you. Yes, you are. Ethan, you watched the Get Back documentary this weekend?
I've watched some of it.
Okay.
Could you does George join the Beatles again? I haven't gotten that far.
Oh, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
No, I've watched it all. I've enjoyed it all. I laughed. I cried.
When did you cry?
I actually cried during not full on cry, but a little misty eyed at the end of the rooftop stuff.
Yeah.
Just like wow. Wow.
I felt myself welling up a little when Paul looked at the camera and said, "And then there were two." That moment, I found
that was like
very
a gut
moving.
punch.
Yeah. But Ethan, anything else you want to say, or do you want to introduce the next person on the call here? Because you actually demanded to introduce this person.
Yeah,
we started recording.
It was part of my rider.
Yeah.
I will not appear on this show unless I get to bully this person. Yeah.
I thought it was going to be complimentary. Okay, well, go for it.
Let's see what we get. Yeah.
Pods lifting pods is what I'm all about.
Yeah, let's lift each other up.
I actually, after I demanded to introduce him, I failed to actually come up with anything to say. So, knock knock, who's there? It's Sam Wiles from that show.
It's called Paul or Nothing, and you know it's called Paul or Nothing.
No,
Ethan.
Paul. Jeez, what a chatterbox this one.
At least I didn't just say okay. Hey everyone, this is Sam from Paul or Nothing. How are we all doing this evening? Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, yeah.
Sam.
Thank you for coming, Sam. It's also very, very late where you are.
No,
So
at least I
this
haven't
is,
fallen asleep
very
this
kind
time.
of you.
You know, it's
Yeah.
That's true.
There's still time.
That is very true.
I only fall asleep during charity events. We all know this. Paul would be getting up there during Live Aid, and I'd just be like, "Oh, I missed him. Oh, damn." No, Get Back. My last 3 days have just been consumed with this movie, both watching it, writing notes, putting out podcasts about it. So I'm glad I get to come
So you've
here.
seen it?
A little bit, yeah. I dabbled.
Okay.
I dabbled here and there. Wake up, get out of bed, watch Get Back. That was literally my schedule for the last 3 days. Stop.
And you clearly have not dragged a comb anywhere near that main affair.
I wish I could have gone upstairs and had a smoke and, that kind of thing. But, yeah, Get Back. It's definitely Peter Jackson's second best trilogy. We'll definitely say that. Certainly better than the Hobbit threesome, but we're not going to get into that here. I came at it as a Peter Jackson
You're putting
fan.
this behind Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, oh, no. There is no,
Nerd.
we know what we were discussing off mic here earlier, so yeah, I'll take that on the chin. I came at this as a Peter Jackson filmmaking fan first and foremost, rather than just purely a Beatles project. And it is, regardless of what you think about the Beatles, it's a masterful documentary. It is a really interesting experiment in editing that was a total success. And then just there are several moments throughout, whether it's him cutting back to the Rishikesh home movie footage or using split screen camera angles for the rooftop sequence. It is just genius filmmaking, but it's also full of some of the best music ever, some of the most heartwarming, feel-good moments I've seen in a documentary for a while. And a lot of that's because Jackson puts you in the mindset of the Beatles. Like, you do go, oh shit, George has left. You go, yay, he's back. You feel good when they go to Abbey Road, or like oh wow, these songs actually work now that Billy Preston's here. Like, he really puts you in the mindset of these four guys, and it's just masterful filmmaking. I really enjoyed it.
What was your moment, like that you pull it out to say, like, this is? I was so happy to see this piece. You know, maybe not the most important section, but like just like I'm so happy that this happened. Or
when Ringo admitted that he farted, that was.
Oh yeah,
I'm sorry, I farted.
That part is unreal.
yeah.
Part that made me
quiet,
cry, if we're going to do that as well, when John was singing "Don't Let Me Down" on the rooftop. I don't know why I was crying, but I just was. And when Paul's playing with Heather at the start of part 3, I was like, oh, I've got a beardy dad playing with this kid. I can't handle this. Yeah, that was.
Why don't you cry when you do Blotto Beatles? We're a bunch of beardy dads.
No, I mean,
is that not enough for you, Sam?
It's more.
He's crying for different reasons at that point.
It's more like drunk crying, like, oh, what have I done with my life? Where's it?
I love you guys.
That was great.
Glynis.
Well, I want to keep chatting about all of this stuff, but
can I just throw something out there? Because I didn't say my favorite part.
Oh yeah,
okay.
The tasteful masturbation joke that John Lennon made
about the Boy Scouts?
Yeah.
And, it was almost like lost a little bit on me. Yeah, he says, "Let them wear long pants" or something.
Yeah,
it's like a very proper,
because in shorts.
It's like a very proper,
too tempting
like,
in shorts.
British.
I was a Boy Scout, and there was
the
no
U.S. would be much more.
There was no.
Of course, you were a Boy Scout, Sam. I don't even know what that means.
Sam, would you like to introduce? We have 2 boxes left here on our call. Would you like to introduce one of them?
I will introduce the only person who I've not done a podcast with here so far. I've been a fan of her show for a while. Their episode talking about LGBT topics with the Beatles is literally one of my favourite Beatle podcast episodes ever. Let me introduce Alison from BC The Beatles.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Alison.
Welcome.
Who's flying solo? Who potentially will have her partner with us in a while, but
we need to figure this out, Sam, because it's we've been going around in circles for a long time. It's it's kind of on us, but we'll figure it out to record together. Rock on. And before I start, Erica, my co-host, will be joining us in a little bit. I think she's
excellent.
Yeah. She's planning on coming in. So thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Thank you for coming.
As I hear you guys talking about it, I'm like, oh, that moment. Just so many, so much to talk about. It's like a brain dump,
You have, I think, maybe the most exciting reveal story, because I saw from Instagram that you went to the LA premiere.
I did. Yeah, I did go to the LA premiere.
What was that all about?
It was fun. It was really crazy fun. To see, Peter Jackson sort of put together a 90-minute teaser, I guess you could say, just like a highlight reel, and he also was like in it to give like a description of how he made the film and brought it up to the standards that he did with such really shitty footage, and we got to see the entire rooftop concert on the big screen, which was insane. I kept saying to people afterwards, I'm like, my face hurts from smiling so much. Because I was just like, the whole time I was like, I can't believe this. And they gave us free popcorn. So yeah, it was a good night.
Who was hanging out at that premiere?
Sean Lennon and Sean and Julian. And Stella McCartney was there, along with Jeff Jones from Apple. I spotted Peter Asher, who was wearing a very orange coat, which would have matched his hair perfectly in the 60s. Who else was there? There were, just some LA folks there as well.
I think Fernando Perdomo, the guy who did
Fernando was there. I
the
saw
Ram
him.
album. Yeah, he was there.
Yeah,
I'm a little offended you didn't mention the most important person. Andrew Sandoval was there.
Who is my date for the evening? Yeah. He was, my +1. So, obviously very important person in the Monkees world. I think he's been a guest on another podcast on this call.
That is correct.
Yeah. And who else? Just a smattering of people. But I did get to just briefly chat with Sean after the screening. it's a long story, but I sort of like almost worked for him in New York once when I lived there. So it was good to reconnect, and I just sort of, congratulated him on the premiere, and he introduced me to his girlfriend, who they've been together forever. I've never met her, so that was nice. It was really, there weren't that many people there, so it was a really nice, intimate kind of thing. Felt very safe with like the COVID stuff. We all had assigned seats, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume that Sean had seen it before, no? Or
I assume so, but
didn't.
he was just
Yeah,
like, I got
you
really
must get
teary. I'm like, me too. We all, yeah. Especially seeing it like, right in front of you like that. I was just like, yeah. I mean, a lot of it was like tear jerking for me, for sure. Especially the moment. I think, as you guys are talking about the moment that made you cry, like the moment that just makes me euphoric and also teary is when Yoko's divorce comes through, and you can just see the joy on John and Yoko's faces, and they kiss each other. I just love that moment so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Markedly, you've seen it. It was supposed to be a theatrical presentation, right? There was going to be a cut. Are you much happier having seen this theatrical presentation that you got, and then realizing that we got 6+ hours or so of it?
Yeah.
Or how many hours it was? Longer
I
than
feel super #blessed. Like I need to go to Hobby Lobby and buy a freaking like blessed sign to put in my home because this home is blessed.
I can send you a couple of mine.
You have lived, laughed, and loved.
Yeah.
Well, I've already got like 7 of those. You can't see them all camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like I mean, there's nothing like it. I really hope that once things get a little bit better around the world, like they'll put some sort of cut in a theater, because it was astounding to get to see it like that. But honestly, like I was just excited. I was just as excited to watch it on my TV here. So but it was cool. It was very, very cool.
So, Allison, we have one more set of people on this call, one more box. Do you mind tossing it over to them for final introductions?
Absolutely. Well, these are 2 people that we've also been trying to get on their podcast for a while. No, not, nothing saying of them trying, because it's all been us. So, Sam, you're not alone. We owe a couple of different people podcasts, but love to welcome the awesome and talented Jonathan and Julia from Ranking the Beatles.
Woo! Hey,
Yes.
How are you guys?
Happy New Year, Hare Krishna.
Yes. First night of
happy
Hanukkah.
Simply having a wonderful Krishna time.
No more autographs.
Happy Thanksgiving for some of us.
Totally.
You guys as well. So, Jonathan and Julia, wonderful to see you again. And what are your, what did you leave? What are the takeaways that you have, or the moment that sticks out for you?
My gosh. Well, it's been a funny few days because, we started it Thursday evening after Thanksgiving meals and all that. We did that. And then Friday, I had work Friday, and then I had a show Friday night. So we were able to watch like maybe 45 minutes of the second episode on Friday. Then Saturday morning, we had a bunch of stuff to do. And I think we caught like an hour here and like 30 minutes here. Like anytime there was like a free window, it was like, all right, get back. Then I got to go shower. And then we're going to have dinner. And then we got for another 20 minutes we can watch some. And then we'll come back and do it again. And then today we like watched like the last two-thirds of episode 3. My God, just how good was it? Like I'm blown away on so many levels that I don't think I've fully processed it yet. And as soon as it was done, I wanted to go back and start again. Like I was just ready. Like give me the whole 8 hours.
Give me everything now. Like why not just
I want
fucking
that
give me the
60
whole
hours, PJ.
everything.
Where are
Exactly. Why not? Outside of the fact that it took them like 4 years to correct color correct this footage. Like I don't know how long it takes to do everything. But
We were watching an interview that Peter Jackson did before we got on here, where he was saying at one point it was an 18-hour cut, and I'm like, give me it. Give me all 18.
yeah, that's
Everything,
how I feel now.
Give it all. I want it all. And I think it's the first time I feel like we've gotten a Beatle product, or even just like a thorough documentary or project on a band, where I haven't been like, oh man, I wish they would have included blah blah blah, or I wish they would have gone more into this. Like, I feel like I was given more than I knew I wanted.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, you gave me everything I wanted and more, and I want the rest of it because it was so good. Like, I don't doubt that you gave me the cream of the crop, and I love it. But like, oh my god, I just want more. Like, and I'm surprised that you got through it as easily as you did, because obviously, like, you're not the hardcore fan that I am.
This is what I've been waiting for. What's Julia's take?
Yeah, what was your take?
As being not as big a fan as everyone else on this call, I sort of knew the basic story of, like, it was a very challenging time. By all accounts, it was a miserable time in the studio, and everything was terrible, and they were grumpy and fighting, blah, 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 blah. And watching it, I'm like, this is just wonderfully normal. Like, they look like 4 guys in a band, like, being married to a musician and actually having been in a studio with my husband, because I'm also a photographer, so he will usually have me come with them and, like, just kind of be a fly on the wall and take photos. So just sort of like observing that in my life, I'm like, this is the same thing. They sort of bicker, they goof off, they make fart jokes. It's just, it was so wonderfully normal. And I'm like, why has everyone always made this out to be such a stressful, miserable time? Of course, there was sort of George.
Obvious tension.
Yeah, obvious tension. But, like, they're human, and, like, they're sort of emerging into the next stages of their lives, and that's a thing that kind of happens sometimes. Like, it just, I don't know, it didn't strike me as awkward as I expected it to be.
I think
Which Beatle do you think is most like Jonathan in the studio?
Paul.
Ooh.
Well, because you're usually sort of the leader.
Directive. I give direction. Sometimes probably more than I should.
All right, you sound like Paul.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're the one mostly with sort of that, like, vision that Paul has, and, like, you're not, like, mean about it, and you always let people try. Like, if you're like, this
I don't bring up sore spots from previous recording arguments.
Yeah.
But you remind me a lot of Paul. Like, you have this vision of what you want it to sound like, and you're completely open to other ideas, but you know where you're starting from.
Sure.
You're talking about watching it together. I watched it with my 92-year-old grandfather, and every 5 minutes he said, which one is John Lennon? Legitimately every 5 minutes. And then he went to bed at 10, and I still had like another hour and a half.
Washed his hair in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's looking.
You'd have to be a
Wearing
little
the
bit more
same
specific
clothes.
than that.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I eventually was just like, they're all John Lennon, Papa. It's fine. Don't even worry.
Just keep changing the answer every time.
I think my biggest takeaway was, and one of the things I truly loved about the film, was it's one of the first times I think it really humanizes the 4 of them and shows them as actual human beings and not these, like, larger than life gods of, creative perfection. They all come off as very normal, flawed human beings. Like, it starts, like, the first week of Twickenham, Ringo's got this giant zit on his chin. And, like, I didn't see it before, but thanks to Peter Jackson, there it is.
In HD.
Peter Jackson couldn't even clean that shit up for him. Like, Peter Jackson spends 4 years refining footage and can't clear up some blemishes for him.
Everybody's acne made me feel.
They did more for Neil Young during the last waltz, Like,
Right. I think favorite scene, favorite part, the one that's really stuck with me, and it goes back to the humanizing thing, is that it's the end of part 1 where George has left, and John and Paul and Ringo kind of like close in circle, the 3 of them, and have their kind of arms on each other's hips. And you can tell that they're talking about something really heavy. And it was just kind of a really emotional moment of, like, Paul often talks about going through the 70s and into the 80s, having, like, real issues with, like, trying to, like, come to grips with what was the reality of he and John's relationship? Were they really as close as he thought they were? And my God, like, if that's not three brothers, like, who genuinely love and care about each other, like, taking care of each other in a moment of real trouble, I don't know what is. Like, that was something that made me tear up a lot. And God, I cried a handful of times. Rooftop for sure. Multiple. I mean, there were times where you looked over and I was like, nothing.
Just cut an onion.
I think
is Tommy right? I mean, from the upfront, I like your sentiment because I was thinking about it today. Like, we're all of a certain age, I think, except for Ethan. Sorry, bud. But and then Sam, and then some of us. I don't know. We all get progressively older. Maybe I'm the oldest. I don't know. But is this like the most important Beatles thing like in our life? Like, is this a bigger deal than Anthology? Because I felt it was, only because it was peeking behind the curtain, right? Anthology is telling us nerds a little bit sort of like what we already knew in a way. You know, like, is this the best thing that we could get and that we're going to get?
I think Anthology was bigger for one simple reason. There were no talking head interviews in Get Back where Paul was on a boat or by a campfire.
Sitting poking a fire in a nice cable knit sweater.
That would have made all the difference.
But if Paul did Anthology now, I think he would know not to do that. I really do. I think that he is a different person even from when Anthology came out, you know.
Yeah, but the fact that
I don't know anything about Paul. We actually have an expert on the line.
Well, I mean,
yeah, me.
Paul never do interviews from inside the dome. The dome is still there. I want to see him do all of his interviews as the platform just rises and descends in his little geodesic dome in his backyard.
Was everyone happy that we didn't get talking heads and narration, and that it was just the original fly on the wall?
For sure, yeah.
Well, actually, taking that to the next level, actually, let's lay our cards on the table. Has this totally superseded the Michael Lindsay Hogg movie? And is the Michael Lindsay Hogg movie just going to be a Blu-ray bonus feature from now on?
I think this makes Michael Lindsay Hogg look
an
like
asshole,
kind of a phony throughout the whole thing.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
Like, so not only in that first episode do we get him being like, well, what if we just do it at a children's hospital, but not with really sick kids, just like a couple kids with broken legs, right? Like,
and then how many times does he say, torchlit with like 2,000 Arabs, you know? And you're like, you have a vision. Like, this isn't just a doc. You're steering something in a way. And but I would like to pause everything.
Yeah.
Do we get to the introduction?
Yes.
All right. So, friends, please welcome to the podcast. One of the few podcasters we have not yet met in real life, but have only heard get really hammered on Blotto Beatles. The co-host of BC the Beatles, Erica White.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for making it.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
So happy to be here. Oh my God.
I know that your night was
about
in
Let
demand.
It Be in my head. Yeah, I was invited to Hanukkah and a first night party, and it said in the 28th, and I didn't think Hanukkah would be in November, and then he was like, so you're coming, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. But I cut it off so I could be with you guys, because talking about Let It Be was a thing I wanted to do more than anything else this week after what we've been through over the last 3 days.
So we just wrapped up first impressions real quick, but give us yours. Did you devour it daily?
I watched part 1 on the first day, part 2 on the second day, and then yesterday I watched part 1 and 2 again. And then
wow, today, I think you beat everyone on this call.
Today I watched part 3. I didn't want it to end, and I kind of wanted to, because I was watching it with my dad and my family, and so I just kind of wanted to see it again and kind of feel the lead up to part 3, and having kind of been in the same space, because that's a lot of me being super nerdy about it, but I needed to see it again. Plus, I didn't have the captions on the first time, so I missed a lot of George's like total snark and beautiful, beautiful sarcasm. So yeah, it was worth it seeing again.
What was your
Erica, one thing everyone's kind of done in this initial thing is say like either a scene that they took away that they're saying like this was it for me, or an overall impression, or we've also fallen upon several this was the thing that made me cry in the watching of it.
God, there's so many. I mean, the moment when Paul started calling someone a fuckface. That stands out to me. Like, I love it so much.
We're bloody stars.
So fuckface. Yeah. But, more seriously, the moment that really gets me more than anything, and I think this is kind of one of those things where your own like personal Beatles bleed into your world, is when it was part 3, and when they were rehearsing Long and Winding Road together. But it was the point of Long and Winding Road. It's the version that we have on the album. And there's something about seeing those exact recordings happening in real time, which really got me and gave me total chills. Like it freaked me out. I kind of just stopped and like, wow, okay, and then watch it again. I thought that was incredible. I'm sure Heather Eastman has already been mentioned, Linda's little daughter and the cat, because it's so cute. Oh my God, there's so many things.
When she's doing like her Yoko part too, that's pretty awesome.
And that's another thing, the humor that they brought to this and the humanity that they brought to this, and especially with regards to Yoko, that she was seen in a totally different light, and it was really nice to see more of a personality between her, less of her and John just being very stern and silent and over it all. They were really kind of into it and participating in the joy, which was really nice. Another thing that wasn't so great was like, I was really hoping, like the Alan Klein scene when they were talking about Alan Klein, like it totally felt like a horror movie when I was just like, don't go in there, don't open that door.
That's such a good
so
point.
upsetting. Also, Paul McCartney is some kind of like genius freak from another dimension, but I don't know if I thought that before this, but it just, reestablished that.
This gave me a different perspective on Paul for sure. Like I whatever. I love Paul. I give Paul some grief, but I love Paul. But in this, I think I got another level of something for Paul.
I think he comes off a lot more empathetic than history has painted him out to be at this time, because all he's trying to do is just hold the thing together as best he can through like just kind of like what should have just been a rough patch. And I think he's doing the best he can because no one else seems to want to step up to the plate, and otherwise they're just like a ship without a rudder. But I do think that the footage of him coming up with Get Back on the spot.
Oh my God.
Is something that should be put in the Smithsonian.
And George is yawning. Oh my God.
Could the boys look more bored?
I don't know if like Webster's has like an online dictionary where like there is video accompaniment to definition, but like next to genius or creativity, that footage should be there, because that's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life.
The way he picks out the melody line and like it's something different, and then he starts discarding certain notes and pieces of the phrase to get to it, like to what it really is unreal.
It's really like watching, what I imagine a time lapse version of a sculptor chiseling away at a piece of rock and discarding all the external parts that you don't need, and then ending up with an amazing sculpture. It was absolutely incredible.
It's another one of those crazy Beatles moments where if somebody had written it into a screenplay, you're like, nah, you need to edit that. That's not realistic. Nothing would ever happen like that so perfectly.
Right?
No human can do that.
I also thought it was cool to see him a little bit more vulnerable, like, when they're talking about, like, are we going to go on the roof tomorrow? Is this going to happen? Like, what do we do if we don't? Like, and he was the one who's like, I need to be convinced because I can't get it in my head that we're actually going to do this.
Actually, can I change my best moment of the documentary?
Of course, Ethan.
It's the moment where the idea is suggested to Paul that they go on the roof.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah,
Peter Jackson does a great job with that. Like, that is a cool, like,
you can see the light bulb going off in Paul's head. Like, that's it. But
then he's like afraid of it, like you just said, Alex.
Yeah,
like,
but
he's a little bit like, should I do this?
Yeah, exactly. That's the genius look of terror and also excitement and also trepidation and all those things in Paul's face. You can see there. Also, I tend to think anytime after Brian's death, and that's a whole other topic that comes out in various ways in this documentary, but I tend to think after that, Paul sort of saw it as his chance to sort of take over as, the true leader of the group. So there was a moment where he and John were arguing. I think it might have been the secret microphone in the flower pot.
I think it was the flower pot conversation.
That's such a pivotal part of the whole thing.
Where Paul says to John, you've always been the leader, and John's like, I'm not the leader, you're the leader, and Paul's like, I'm not the leader. And I was like, whoa, this like rocks my world, because that's been one of my total, I die on that hill all the time, where it's like, no, Paul doesn't want to take over. Paul saw it as his moment, but you see a lot to sort of balance that in this documentary in a really human way.
I think that I want to stop on that conversation for a minute too, because I think what's really enlightening there is how much John comes to George's defense in that conversation and is like, listen, I understand how he feels because you've done this to me too. And that's right after Paul was like, you've always been the leader. You're the leader. But he's like, I've tried to throw songs out there and you rearrange them to a part that I didn't want them to be or whatever. And you should know that. And it's hard to tell if Paul's kind of just yesing him at that moment. Or he's like, yeah, no, I do understand what you're saying.
Oh, no,
But even John, a little bit, I think in that, maybe I'm misremembering. Sorry, Sam, I'll go right back. Even John's like, we've done this to George a little bit. I feel like he's kind of saying, we've done this to George. Of course he's going to eventually feel this way, Sorry, Sam, go ahead. You were talking.
There is a very clear point. This might just be me projecting a little bit, but you can tell that, John's bearing his soul. I'm just trying to survive here, Paul. And then, and then you can just tell that Paul's kind of going, yeah. And it's just not going in. He's just kind of going, yeah, John, yeah. But he's really not absorbing what John's saying, I guess. And I think that's just classic kind of Paul avoiding the emotional core of an argument moment, I found it to be quite awkward. Actually, I felt like John was really pushing it, and it didn't reciprocate, I guess.
Well, I felt like they were both kind of talking over each other, not past each other in what they were saying. There was a lot of yeah, you're right. I see. Yeah, you're right. But John was saying something also that maybe Paul didn't know how to take. He was kind of saying I backed off. I couldn't deal with it. You became leader, and you did a lot of things that I really didn't want. But then, how do you react to that? Because he also had the option to be leader, and he didn't. So, what do you say?
I think
that also follows up what Paul was saying earlier, and I think it's back in the Twickenham section, where he's like, I've kind of been put into this role that I didn't really want, and I don't feel comfortable with it, and I don't know that I want this role, but I'm the only one who's willing to do it, and yet nobody supports it, so I don't know what anyone wants from me.
Well, I think that's a little... Sorry to cut you off, Jonathan. I think that's a little... I don't know. I think Paul's a little in error there, because I do think, at one point he did want it. I just don't think he wants it at this moment, because it's really falling apart. So he's the one who has to, to really scoop it all up and try to keep it from slipping between his fingers, Yeah.
It's almost
Scotty, see, you were gonna.
He wanted, but also wanted the initial kind of original support that everyone seemed to have when Brian was still in charge, and it was go team.
Mr. Epstein, yeah.
And then when it's just kind of a ship without a rudder, he's like, oh, there's nothing behind me pushing. Oh, this isn't what I wanted. Okay, yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Good thought.
Oh, so I think that, what I observed from Paul, he was the only one that really cared about the end product. He was always talking about the payoff and what are we doing this for? And everyone else is just kind of like, I don't know, we're just doing it. And so, he got a little bit obsessed, and maybe it's his personality, whatever, with, what is the presentation? What's the presentation going to be? And what is it? Just an album? Is it is it we gonna do a show? We're gonna do it? And he was really kind of obsessed with that. Meanwhile, he's obviously a genius writer, and he's the greatest, most accomplished musician of them all. And he's looking at John playing bass, probably what the fuck? And and he's there's times where he's kind of shit. But I mean, and I just felt like whether he was trying to be leader or not, and maybe he wasn't listening to John, or maybe his mind wasn't going, and it wasn't all getting in there. But I feel like he was so focused on what is the product, and not so much about the music. even though like that's so easy for him. That's the easy part for him. I don't know. That's just kind of my take a little bit there, but
I mean, going off what you just said there, Scotty, there's a lot to talk about with Paul here. I think John was probably the most interesting figure from my perspective, purely because I've always been this very cynical, flippant guy. John was smacked out. He didn't care. He didn't bring any good songs. He reused a track from the WWF record years ago, blah, blah, blah. John was so dedicated as a musician and as an artist and as a collaborator in this documentary. It completely changed my John Lennon during the Let It Be Get Back sessions worldview. Like, when he's looking at Paul, like, so how do you want to play the piano part for She Came In Through the Bathroom Window? Like, he's just, like, looking up like a little kid, like, okay, yeah, cool, yeah, I want to do this. There's like, none of that... whatever, Paul. There was none of that in this, and
none. Yeah.
Some of it might have been edited out. I think a lot of heroin stuff may have been edited out for Disney, and supposedly a lot of Yoko's suggestions may have been edited out because that might be a bit too negative as well. We'll probably see it on the Blu-ray documentary. Who knows? But Lennon was totally changed for me by this documentary, 100%.
Do you think Yoko had the stopwatch for this one too?
What was it? It was Mal with the stopwatch, wasn't it? It was like, oh, it's 3:44. It's pretty good, actually.
How about Mal Evans getting some shine on this documentary?
That's a busy boy.
Yeah. He looked so happy.
The real fifth
he looked so happy playing the anvil.
Oh my god!
No,
I love
tambourine.
And doing everything for them.
On tambourine.
Him playing
The tone of him walking out of that room, Paul's like, oh, Mal, go get an anvil and maybe a hammer. Like, joking around. 10 minutes later, Mal's got the hammer and anvil in the studio after.
Yeah, he's got bow ties, he's got shoes.
George makes him go out for some bow ties, right?
So much toast.
Bow ties.
So much toast.
so much
Toast and tea. How about that scene where he's staring into space, like clearly high as a kite, playing the tambourine behind the drum set?
Yeah.
Is amazing.
I love him so much.
How about,
And then he's like,
sorry, how about
Mal, go get...
deflecting the cops? You know, Mal was like, oh, you're
He was great at that. Yes.
not going to do it.
Tweeted this earlier. As amazing as the rooftop is, the unsung heroes of that day are Mal Evans, Jimmy the doorman, and Jen the receptionist, who was just like, I don't know anything. Like, I'll be right back with somebody, and just ghost these guys.
Yes.
Hour.
Yeah, you see him up on the roof where he's just like chilling, like.
Who are these Beatles you're talking about?
and then he just keeps it totally cool the whole time. Like,
This
it's
is
the
a
most
bakery.
impressive,
What do you-
like, version of the scene. I want to know more about her story. I would love to see like bonus DVD footage of like her recanting that day.
Yes.
Like, I want to know her perspective of how that went down.
Actually, while we're talking about Apple people, can I just say something I noticed while watching? It's you kind of get the impression from all the books about, you know, how Apple was functioning or not functioning at that time, but it's you really saw a lot of people walking different places with things in their hands, not seeming to really do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You know, I kind of think that speaks to what we were talking about a minute ago about Paul, too. You know, Apple is like just a manifestation of these brilliant ideas they have, and they just keep coming and coming and coming, but without really like proper management and organizational structure above and around what it is that Paul and John are doing. They hook up with Magic Alex. They have all of these crazy things going on.
Right.
I was shocked.
Yeah, every one of these meetings is so tough. It's like, it's either 7 people having different conversations in one room, or it's, you know, Michael Lindsay Hogg trying to awkwardly like convince them to do something, and none of them are ready to have that conversation. And like you're saying, Erica, just such a clear sign that they need a leader. They need someone at the front, at the helm of the ship here.
It was astounding to me how they were self-aware of that. Because I don't know, I guess because, you know, we all, you know, study the Beatles, you know, obviously we all do the podcasts, and I guess I just never realized that they knew they needed a leader, you know, because I mean, I talk number one Brian stan right here, but I always talk about, what happens after Brian died and how it fell apart. And it's like, I didn't know that they knew that, so to hear them talk about, when Mr. Epstein, although they pronounce his name wrong, I can't even get into that. Right
They
now.
all did.
Can't even get into that.
I thought of you guys.
We only know that from you.
Excuse me, Americans. No, he didn't pronounce it wrong at all.
Sam has
no.
obviously never listened to our two-parter or
Oh.
2 episodes about how to.
We do
properly
not
pronounce
want to get
Brian's
into this
name.
right now because this will derail the entire Let It Be conversation.
Whoa.
I can't right now.
Yeah, shut up, Sam.
Anyway, Sam, we'll sidebar this and I'll school you. How about that?
On that sentiment, I got dipped for a second, so if it's been covered, cut me right off. But the talk of the Beatles, when they were talking about the flower pot conversation, that sort of thing, like, is some of this the first time that they're addressing this? Like is this just shit that they have kept in forever? And is that
I don't know
weird?
about that, but I need to just. What the fuck is Michael Lindsay Hogg's accent? I couldn't figure it out. Like the entire 3 parts. Every time I hear him talk, it's just like, where are you from, mystery man?
He gets it from the cigar, man.
And Paul smoking the cigars at the beginning.
That was so cool.
Have we talked about the smoking yet? There is so much smoking.
Isn't it so cool?
It's so
They
upsetting.
do look cool.
I did.
My former smoker
Yeah.
brain. I was like, man, that'd be real good right about
Did you notice they had a warning on it, like they do for it contains nudity and smoking or sexual? Like what?
But because it contains that much smoking, it's not like a smoke. It's like everyone.
It's a lot of smoking.
Contains
Like-
conversations about Boy Scouts and
Well,
smoking.
it's funny
Constant
that you
smoking.
brought up when Heather's in the studio and everyone is smoking. Like that would never happen right now. Like she's in the studio with like 20 people and every single one of them is smoking cigarettes.
And Billy Preston as well. Since he's got his hands free, he smokes more than all 4 Beatles combined. Like,
Yeah.
and
There
then
was a
the one
cigarette
scene he
move
does-
that I had never seen. Scotty, maybe you know this as a guitarist, or Jonathan, where they put the guitar string into the filter to hold the cigarette. Did you see that at the beginning? That's not a thing.
I've never understood the point of that. Like, it's just going to go to waste anyway. It's just something that.
I've always loved when Slash had a cigarette burning. I thought that was cool. I did think that was cool.
Do it or clapped in, and the headstock gets a burn, and it looks awesome. No, it's just weird. Like, just put it out. You're not going to finish that.
The only shot in the movie where Billy Preston doesn't have a cigarette, George leans over and goes, "You want a cigarette, Billy?"
You want a ciggy?
Yeah, Siggy. I like that. I think it's when Billy was so excited about that stylophone. I've never seen. He was so pumped to play with that little. That was awesome to see.
I mean, Billy
Clearly,
was
there's
like-
a couple of like pivotal moments where things happen.
Wait. Oh.
Yeah.
Hold on.
What?
I wish.
I have a stylophone.
I wish we could.
I have it right here.
I wish we could only see the joy on your face if you had your camera on.
I know. Is it Billy?
Oh, joke's on you. I don't have joy on my face.
Where did you find it?
On my floor.
You win.
Procure it.
I don't know. I don't make these things. Are you God? I don't have all the answers.
We're just asking for one.
It's a good thing.
Like, when something strange and bizarre enters the world of enters the creative realm, they're immediately like, how can we put this to use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Like-
microphone George is holding on his neck, like the weird talk boxy thing or whatever.
That's
Yeah.
his guitar pickup, right? That's what I thought it was.
Was it a pickup? I couldn't tell what it was.
I thought he was holding his acoustic electric pickup to his neck, maybe.
I
Maybe.
couldn't tell what.
I mean, I'm not going on the record.
One of the more exciting moments, as a musician, gear nerd, was when they wheeled in the Leslie
Oh yeah,
in Apple.
a fresh
and it's
Leslie.
just
Yeah.
a fresh Leslie.
Yeah. A
fresh
It's like,
lady.
oh, you know what's thank you.
Who said freshly? That's awesome. That was
Allison.
Allison. Right?
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That was an Alison Bourne original.
Yeah, copyright.
There was
that.
even some Paul Rickenbacker in this, which I never knew even happened during these sessions. I was like,
Yeah.
Dude, that Rickenbacker has seen some stuff and some things. I'm like, Paul, dude, the paint job, what happened to it in like the 2 years since you got it?
Yeah, things got crazy on the Rain video shoot. I don't know.
And he said the nut was backwards in the Rickenbacker, which is something I never knew. And now I know.
I've been told
It's
similar
also-
It
things.
was moving, yeah.
A Fender Malibu acoustic that showed up in episode 1, which I've never seen discussed in any Beatles gear threads or conversations, like a Fender Malibu acoustic. And you don't
Is that
see
the one with
used on it.
the like the Stratocaster style headstock?
Yep.
Yeah.
You see George grab it, but you don't see him actually play it. But I've never seen that discussed in any topic of Beatles gear conversation.
Speaking of Fender, I do love that moment where they're talking about getting the QE2 and they're going to have it just given to them for free and donated. And George goes, we can't even get Fender to give us an amp. How are we going to get this boat given to us?
Yeah. I think it's funny when they're talking about that stuff that George seems most concerned about what it's going to cost. I thought that was a funny thing where they're just like,
Taxman, baby.
Taxman himself.
Like par for the course. That's like, I was like surprised George didn't talk about money more. I was
Yeah.
like, where's the George? Yeah. Every other word, should be how much.
Oh no,
cost.
there's a money-making endeavor at Apple that may not work out
yeah,
for the best.
i.e. Magic
oh,
Alex's
no.
entire division. And they pull out that guitar with the rotating neck. They're
Oh
like,
my
this is the price.
Yeah,
Made of- it's like a Minecraft toy.
It's like fucking little play school shit right there.
Yeah.
That said everything everybody needs to know about Magic Alex forever. That's it.
Well, I think
believe it.
Alan Klein cut Magic Alex pretty early, I think, when he came on.
Well, George Martin had a sick Magic Alex burn when they're talking about they're at Twickenham and they're talking about the studio, and George Martin's like, well, Alex is almost finished with it. Who knows if it'll work or something, and I'm like,
Oh, the best.
sick burn.
Most posh burn.
The best.
I was really hoping we would get to see his actual studio build out, like what he presented as.
Yeah.
Here you go, guys. Like, what did they walk into?
Yeah.
Because I'd always heard about like the little speakers around
The
the
16
room.
speakers, yeah.
I really wanted to see, because like they were like no cameras were allowed that day, and I'm like, why not? I wanted to see that shit show so badly.
That wasn't the best George Martin burn. Let me just say, it's when they go to Apple Studios and George Martin looks over to Glyn Johns and goes, "So now that we're here, basically in my studio, they actually sound pretty good, Glyn, don't they?" And it's like,
Damn.
yeah.
There was
Did
the
anyone else? Oh, sorry.
no, there was the unspoken tension between George Martin and Glyn Johns, where
for sure.
I think Paul is in the playback room at Apple at one point, and he says something like, "Oh, something." Now that Billy's here, it's great or whatever. And George is sort of like, oh, yeah, we didn't do anything, Glyn. And, you could sense the snark. George Martin, man, he is...
He was so
he's
present in this
form.
doc as well. I didn't know George Martin was... I thought he was a persona non grata during these sessions. And
Me too.
Yeah.
Me
he's
too.
there solving all the problems.
And then you see little baby Chris Thomas, which I loved, at the boards.
Aw.
And Eric and I have hung out with Chris. He's a sweetheart. But seeing him there was really fun because, he had just gone through the shit show that was the White Album. Nice to see he wasn't too traumatized to come back.
Back to the egg. Woo!
On that point, I sort of loved George here. I thought that he came off, first of all, like, maybe I've never knew, but like he is devilishly handsome in this.
Oh, yes, he is.
Right now, like he is looking really good. But also
Slick
like
back
that
hair,
scene
yeah.
where he's laying on the floor reading a newspaper in sort of the basement of Apple, which is not like his turf or whatever, and he's there participating. Like, I actually give George, I give George grief on our podcast, if anyone listens to our podcast, and sometimes I give George Martin a little bit of grief. But like in those moments, I was just like, wow, like this, he's here and participating and I don't know,
You have a podcast?
Not one that you've been on, Ethan.
Damn.
I also liked how George Martin is the one that Ringo admits to that he farted.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wouldn't tell George Martin that.
and George is like
Having his presence.
yeah, exactly. He just doesn't seem like a guy you would tell I farted to,
And he was going to try
But
to
then he
blame
has
it
the
on
whole
George Martin.
explanation.
I think that comfort level only comes was because at some point in time, George Martin turned to Ringo and went, "I just farted."
I just broke wind, Richard. I just broke wind.
What about their code names? Do you guys? They had code names.
Oh, that was so ridiculous.
What the hell was
Like, it's
that?
never
Where did
really
that come from? Yeah.
introduced or whatever. They call Ringo
Like
Russia.
Russia?
Russia,
Yeah.
France,
Yeah.
Francis George.
But no one knew what they were. Nobody knew.
That was Michael Lindsay Hall thinking he was like making Bond or something,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
it'd be
Like he
cool.
was,
Yeah.
And then he
Wait,
called
they
him
call it his head.
RS
Thank you for. Yeah. Oh, I hated that so much. Well, RS got here first. It's
Yeah.
like, you can go fuck off, dog, honestly. All right. And then I love when the flowers come after George has left, and Michael Lindsay Hogg goes, "Who are they from?" And Ringo goes, "Oh, the Hare Krishnas."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, Harry, do you like him?" And he's like, "Oh, God." What a phony.
could there have been anybody less well suited to doing a Beatles documentary? I mean,
God.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him at times because
Of
he
course.
was just so in over his head and he was trying to make these absurd suggestions. It's like he'd never really researched
Yeah.
who the Beatles were or
And
how to
he was-
work with them. Or,
Yeah, he was trying to craft this narrative, which I imagine you do, sort of, when you make a documentary.
Yeah.
I've never done it, but he's sort of like, we need to like fabricate some sort of big moment at the end of this, and so that's why he's pushing for it. I'm like, isn't a point of this to sort of just document what happens? You know, the Beatles are going to break up. Isn't that a fantastic ending anyway? You know,
Just tell the truth in
Yeah.
a children's hospital where they just have broken legs and are super sick.
yeah, they're not.
Well, Tommy, maybe just
too
maybe just an
crippled.
orphanage. You know, maybe.
When he's talking about that, was anybody else, because they show John's face a lot, was anybody else waiting for John to do some sort of like face to make fun of, like, disabled people? Because I was.
Oh, yeah.
I was so like, oh God, please don't do it, John. Please don't do it.
Be stomping or whatever.
Yeah, maybe they cut it out. Who knows?
Do
But
the hands.
it had to have happened.
On the back of that note, John Lennon seems like a tough guy to work with. I'm gonna say it. This is where I flipped a lot on this whole, like, right. I'm more John than I am Paul or whatever. But then I was like, man, I can't imagine coming in and John is like just kind of doing his John thing this whole fucking time. Like, it's got to be hard to be like, we've got to get some stuff done. We've got 14 days. We've got 28 days, whatever they end up with. But he's not a serious man.
I think that George walking out was the only thing really that saved this project, because John kind of got his shit together after that happened and he came back and he was much more on the ball.
But
Well,
still
there's
the
these
goofy
sea change
one,
moments,
yeah.
right, in the show, right? There's the sea change moment I think of coming to Apple. That's a huge one where you just see everyone's face change. Everything changes.
Oh,
the vibe is better. Clearly,
big
George
time.
is back. There's a sea change moment, I think, when Billy Preston comes in. And
Absolutely.
suddenly everyone is like,
100%.
we want to impress this
Hells
guy a little bit, and he's
yeah.
filling in something. He's driving us to be better.
And he's
then
also
I think
just like expressing joy about the project.
He's so
Oh, he's
happy
so
to be
pumped,
there.
yeah.
He's like, you guys are
Even
Beatles.
during like
I'm in the
a
room.
15-minute dig it jam, he's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yes, let's go. It's
Like he's
Look
smiling.
at them
the whole
cigarettes
time.
coming.
And they're the I Have a Dream thing. Are they jamming that to I Want You, She's So
Yeah.
Heavy? Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that moment is awesome. And then clearly there's a sea change when they step on the roof. Like that second when they step on the roof and start performing, and they're like, we got this. We know exactly what this is. Like those were all like magic.
Even
magic
George
things for me.
looks happy there, and he was fighting it the most.
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, he was smiling.
And that
yeah.
upshot of George is just so iconic. Like whoever's shooting from his knees, like up the Telecaster, you're like, that's what you picture when you're thinking of the rooftop,
up that Telecaster, yeah.
right? Yeah.
That was used for a solo album, wasn't it? That shot, I believe, like a live, the show for George Fest. Yeah,
Okay.
George Fest, that sounds awesome.
Weird Al plays on it. It's so good.
Becker, coming back to what you were saying about John not being that serious, my level of anxiety,
Which is something
went
I know.
through-
I'm not saying that I don't know that he's
No,
sort
no,
of
but like,
I
and it's not even just about John, but my level of anxiety every time they started like just jamming these old covers or their old songs, or like it just went through the roof because I'm like thinking of the calendar in my head, being like, would you guys just finish these songs? Like, no, George, you can't bring an old brown shoe right now. We have 3 days to get this thing done. Yeah, let's work Old Brown Shoe for an hour, a song we've never played before. That sounds like a grand idea, fellas.
Yeah,
Tommy, your
George
inner
Martin
Paul
steps
is
into
really
like
coming out right now.
Yeah, exactly.
George Martin's like, let's polish Octopus's garden right now, and it's like, this is not the time. You know?
Yeah.
But even Paul's happy to be like, yeah, let's do this weird ventriloquist take of 2 of us right now instead of trying to actually record one.
Yeah,
Let's do half a pound of grease paint. Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah.
I don't think anyone wanted to do that except for Paul in that moment, but.
How many songs in this were like, it said Lennon McCartney composition? You're like, I've never heard of this before
Yeah.
in my life.
What was that conversation
It seemed
that
like
Paul
they
is
did.
talking to maybe a lawyer or something? They're going through all the songs that he has licensed or something like that.
That's Dick James, my
Oh, the
friend.
Dick James stuff. Oh,
And they're going through.
Yeah.
And is there a song called "Does Shrimp Have Good Mothers"? Am I making this up?
Yeah.
This is a Paul McCartney song. I don't know anything about this, but
And then Richie gives that great line, George, you want to see what you own 0.5% of?
Yeah. What about when George is like opening up to John about a solo album
oh yeah,
and how like
thought that was
supportive
very cool.
John is? Like,
that's so good.
Yeah.
that was
Even
such
Yoko as
great.
well?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just loved how George is like, I have enough, songs for 10 years, and then it's like, oh, BRB just gonna blow them all on a double album.
Yeah.
Be back later.
Yeah. Awesome.
I do love that. That moment. That moment is really, really great. I think because
I think it's very
thought it was
special.
interesting when he broaches it, he kind of lays out the first sentence, and you can tell as he's like formulating in his head, how do I say I want to make my own record and not like do it in a way that's destructive to the unit as a whole.
Yeah.
Like he really
Like-
took his time to find his words, and
It was
which I
thoughtful.
thought seemed
Yeah.
really telling, because like everyone says, oh, George is ready to leave and John's ready to leave, but they all at various points are talking about like future plans and protecting the brand and continuing doing Beatle things. And when he mentions that, he's very specific about how he approaches it as like clearing the deck so they can move forward.
Yeah.
That was really interesting.
Totally.
it was a
Good
great
point.
model for the Beatles gone forward if they
I
were able
know.
to do it.
yeah.
Well,
I wanted to ask what y'all thought about this idea, because it comes up in the film about bringing Billy Preston in full time, and how
Yeah.
do you think had they done that, how would that have changed the trajectory of the band going forward? Do you think it would have been a good idea, a bad idea?
Well,
I think
it's-
that.
Oh.
I think it will.
Sorry,
The
Scotty.
Billy shine would have worn off a little bit, but
Yeah.
Well,
like that initial thing would have, it might have got
Billy's
a
on
little
2
rougher.
songs on Abbey Road anyway, so...
Yeah. He does
Yeah.
that organ part on She's So Heavy, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds just like it.
Yeah, I got the vocal organ thing down.
I sort of feel like Ethan is like the 2 old men from the Muppets, just like yelling at us from the upper.
Statler and Waldorf. Thank you
Oh
very
wow!
much.
We can't quite.
Well, I keep thinking of
We can't see them in the
I keep
stage
thinking
lights.
of things
you know?
to say. I keep thinking of things to say, but they are completely unrelated to what the other people are talking about. It's like you're having a conversation about John, and I'm thinking, wouldn't this have been awesome if they had like Ron Howard narrating like Arrested Development through the whole documentary? It's like, look, George, I'm not upset. He was upset.
Can you do that for us?
Yeah. I want.
Yeah.
The
I want your
recut
version.
with Ethan.
The recut with Ethan
Yeah.
being Ron Howard. Yeah.
John, have you written any song? Yeah, plenty of them. He hadn't.
Look, I don't want to be a downer, but can we keep Ron Howard away from Beatles documentaries?
Oh, he did 8 days a week, didn't he, or whatever?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. Yeah.
Is it not good?
I was okay with 8 days a week. I didn't hate it.
It's good if you've never heard anything about the Beatles before.
Well, it's that classic, like,
Didn't enjoy
you'll
it.
never believe this. Right out of World War II. These 4 young lads from
I'll never believe this.
But even this episode, this whole show started with a little bit of that. I'm like, oh, come on, Peter. What are we doing in this intro? Like, he should have just fucking dropped us right into Twickenham.
Yeah.
Like, come on. If people don't know what happened, then there's no catching them up at this point.
Okay,
you know?
but hold on. I actually disagree because I think he should have done that at the end. I think we should have had the next year of the Beatles at the end in another montage.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
What happened to actually break them up?
Yeah.
To get
It
to
is
the-
true. Yeah. It leaves us in a weird world.
Yeah, I
does.
agree with Becker. I disagree. Actually, no, I disagree with Becker, and I disagree with Tommy a little bit. But I actually like.
I just hate everybody.
So you just have your own
Difficult,
points.
huh, Allison?
I just want to say that, you know. No, but I actually like.
Welcome to the club, Allison.
I'm not gonna.
Come join me on the balcony.
Ethan, I could never live up to your roast qualities of all of us. You keep us humble. You keep us young, Ethan. No, but I actually liked how he treated the prior history of the Beatles, because
I
it
did too.
included things that maybe people had forgotten about or whatever. I liked how he included more footage of the Manila stuff, and because they talk about Manila, in the first, I think, part, and
They make that-
I think for
yeah.
some people that would have been totally lost on them. And also there's Brian footage in the beginning, so
All right, I get it.
Do you know what caught me off guard?
You could have just said that.
Kind of
Yeah.
around that point in the documentary where they're doing rock and roll music, and it's kind of cutting back and forth between them in the studio and Budokan.
yeah, I love that.
And then they have like the audience in there for some reason.
Yeah, it was
Oh, I
like
like
fake
that.
crowd
That's
noise
not-
at a stadium.
Yeah.
I like that. I liked how it reminded us that these are still like the Fab Four Beatles, you know.
I think almost everything in that kind of preamble intro was used as a callback later on, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of references
Yeah.
to like Quarrymen, where it shows the Two of Us lyrics and it says the Quarrymen original. Then there's like the Who's That Little Old Man callback later on. So I think it was there for like callback reference. And we were talking about this earlier. This is not necessarily made for the casual fan, which I kind of love that they made something not for the casual fan, but that intro was almost like for the casual fan, and it's like, cool, that's all you got, fuck you, hop in, let's go.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. It's
Yeah.
like not enough to catch anyone up, though.
We're
Like
going.
Yeah.
So, let's go.
I thought it was great. I mean, so I had seen last week. I saw the Brian Wilson documentary. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I didn't watch it
Talk
yet.
about
I wanted to watch that.
I want to watch it.
Yeah, it's good, but it has a lot of like talking heads, like we were talking earlier. It has talking heads, it has people sort of like saying like, "Oh, this in my room is important because it made me feel like this," or Brian Wilson's a genius because, and it's like you don't have to have that shit in there. It kind of makes it worse. The best parts of that documentary are just Brian talking with the interviewer. So that is sort of made for who I call normies. Like not the fans. So I was very
Simple folk.
Because I'm always wondering what Dave Grohl thinks about this artist. Is my
love to know but I just, those of us who have had our brains ruined by these people, it's like, okay, finally something for me that I don't have to like cringe over for 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, whatever.
It is great. It does limit who you can watch this thing with, though, because if you have to either be watching it by yourself or with other like-minded members of the tribe.
Sociopaths, yeah.
Or
Like,
vice
I
versa.
don't
Yes.
think Peter Jackson or anyone involved with the production anticipated that the average viewer would have someone to watch it with.
You think they did a demographic study?
That
I
seems
mean,
like
I'm speaking from experience.
I was super excited about this. Earlier this evening, I was saying, I'm ready to start it again. I want to watch it again. I don't think she would let me. And when I brought it up, she was like, I'm not opposed to it. And I was like, that's a breakthrough. Oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Julia, because you're like, I'm not on the rest of your level. Like, what were your impressions of the whole thing? You said that it seemed like them having a good time, like that kind of thing. But it's like I'm just curious if anybody else here knows of anybody who watched it that's not like, a total Beatles fucking nerd waste our lives on this stuff kind of thing. To put it nicely.
There were some parts that were a bit slower than others, but I stayed with it. Like I was able to watch all of it all the way through. There were a couple points where I did pick up my phone and like check my email real quick.
Cast her out.
I feel like those were times when it was an argument that just kept going around and around.
Well, there were some times where
Tedious in real life, like just these like circular arguments that don't resolve themselves, and then it happens again a half hour later.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of like, somebody make a fucking decision, please.
And I'm very like, I sort of identify with Paul in that he's trying to like just get everyone to like get this thing done. He's like, we have 2 weeks or at some point 3 weeks to like, we have a goal, like we're trying to do this thing. And I think that's kind of why he was trying to force like the big finish that he wanted, was because he's like, if I can just set a goal for them, then we have something to strive for. Otherwise, we're just going to like sit around here and like do this goofy shit all day, and then we call it a night, and then they stroll in at 11:30, not ready, you know, like, so I feel his like frustration as like that kind of person who's
You're
like,
a task oriented.
yes, I'm like, let's get it done. What's the most efficient way? Come on. So I'm just like, it was a little bit driving me crazy to watch it, just like, and I think I said probably like 6 or 7 times, like, wow, they're really acting like a bunch of people who don't have anything to do in the next week. Like,
And they mostly don't. I think that's the... Has anyone seen The Magic Christian? I've never seen it. But it doesn't seem like it should be delaying a Beatles record. It seems like they could have plowed right over Ringo's obligation to be part of Magic Christian. And
part of it that you actually see is like some scenery getting wheeled in the movie.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a thing that exists.
Or John Lennon
Peter
treating
Sellers
Peter
being
Asher
very awkward.
very poorly. Yeah.
That was so awkward
Oh my
because
God.
Peter Sellers is like
Peter
one of their
Sellers,
heroes,
that's right.
and now John is like out gooning the goons.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, this is
that was
uncomfortable.
weird that they didn't... Yeah.
Yeah, I think not only should they have added Billy Preston to the lineup permanently, they should have added, what's his name?
Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers.
Just for comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones have a
comedic
guy that
effect.
just dances on stage. So it's like, why not have this sort of guy?
Back to Boston.
Exactly. The birthplace of all music, Boston. You know, you guys ever heard of a little band called Aerosmith?
No.
So just
No, I haven't. In fact, I haven't heard of those bands.
No.
They did that come
But what is Dave
Where are they
Grohl
from?
Becker just
just-
brought us all here to convert us into Aerosmith fans.
Yeah, because we're all huge Aerosmith fans. But Becker and I are secretly doing this as a way to get our drinking Aerosmith podcast going.
sips.
drunk in an
Very
elevator, would that be cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane,
You know what I
got a
think was
Grohl.
most interesting for me, and just like this is maybe the last, like for me, that I have.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Do an Aerosmith podcast while doing whippets, and you can call it aerosol.
Oh, good one. Nice.
I don't know who made this point earlier, talking about the end of the movie. Someone said they wanted to talk about the end of the Beatles. Did anyone else feel like this film suffered in part 3 for the fact that it wasn't about the album Let It Be, and it was just about the Let It Be Get Back sessions? Because I was like, so there's no talk about George coming back to finish off I Mean Mine. There's no talk of Phil Spector at all. We don't know if the album was a success. We don't even know if the album came out, bar from a couple of title things saying, this is on the album Let It Be. And the last 10 minutes was like, just get this over with. I mean, it's like, Peter, this is streaming. We will watch 40 hours of this crap. Like, slow down, man. And
But is there footage of it to complete that story?
You could have
I don't
shown me
think it
those
matters.
pics. You could have
Is
shown me
there
those.
footage of the flower pot?
hey, well done, Ethan. Thank you for coming in
You
there.
could have shown me those pictures where John has the huge beard in a slow montage, and then some of the stuff from their solo careers, like whatever.
I was surprised he put like the last day's footage with the credits. I was like,
Yeah.
I was heartbroken that my favorite interaction in the whole of those sessions didn't make it in because it was a January 1970 thing. And it's the one time where my two passions in life, the Beatles and Dave D, Dozy Beaky, Mick and Titch, cross paths.
Where George mentions them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might have heard that Dave D has left the group, but Mickey, Titch and I will keep doing great things at number 2.
Like it was almost like Peter Jackson was like, well, Michael Lindsay Hogg showed all of Two of Us, Long and Winding Road, and Let It Be. I can't do that, even though I'm going to do the entire rooftop gig. You know, it's like, just show them, man. Come on, we'll wait. We'll wait.
But if you're a filmmaker,
climax.
isn't it a nice finish to just watch everyone listening to playback? You know, isn't that just a way to finish a film? You know, like instead of saying like this isn't what I want it to be and it is what it is. Like if you're going through footage and you have the Beatles there and you have all of their significant others, like that's a pretty
Having
good
a
moment.
good time,
when
showing the joy.
Ringo puts his hand on top of Linda and Paul's hand, like
That was so funny.
that's
That was so
pretty
cute.
nice.
Yeah, that
you
was
know?
adorable.
Like,
Yeah.
How many of the editorial choices in this movie do you think were made simply to spite Michael Lindsay Hogg?
Why do we have to call him Michael Lindsay Hogg? Like, why can't he just be Michael Hogg? Like, what is going on with that?
Mikey Hogg.
No, MLH.
It's like one of those names where you have to say it, you know.
Speaking of hogs, can I bring something up here?
Yep.
Hey,
I dread to think this is going to
Maybe.
Did you all happen to notice a scene at Apple where everyone's standing around, George is sitting down reading, I think he's reading a Beatles book, Ringo's leaning against the piano,
Julie looks horrified already.
and it cuts in close to George, right? But in the background is Ringo in these blue jeans. And y'all, Ringo's junk. So on display.
Really?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
Ringo was back in the Thunder.
wow.
Wait, were those the
Really?
ones that had so
You just see his dick. Oh
Really?
He is somehow the most
Good night,
he is
Vienna.
somehow the best dressed Beatle and the Beatle with the most visible penis out.
You know, everyone talks about the drummer being the most like the backbeat, like the backbone of a band. Here's the backbone.
Wow. Oh,
damn, Jonathan.
Man,
I
I
missed
only
this.
need one drumstick.
Were those
He's the cock and balls holding the whole thing together.
I'm shocked that it's not like a GIF
were those-
on Twitter right now.
were those the
Like
ones with the
Beatles
holes
accounts.
in them? Because I think I was more like horrified by the holes in his jeans, like in the back of his jeans.
I've got a hole in me pocket.
Is that the
Hey! Okay, can we talk about the fashion? I mean, starting
Yeah.
off,
Yes.
George
Oh my
Harrison's Flower
Wait.
Power Ugg boots. Oh
So
my
I want,
god!
let me can I go through? Let me go through. Scotty, I imagine you'll put some bumper music on this later. It'll be like Beatles fashion. All right, so here we go. So here are my pitches for the best outfits of each one of them, and then I'd like to hear other opinions. I think you're right, Sam, that we all want to talk about George's pastel pink suit, purple pirate shirt, and the moccasins, the Flower Power moccasins he's wearing. I think we're also forgetting, though, this is a real sleeper pick. The knee-high magenta boots at the beginning of the film.
Those
are
big
off the
those
cuff.
he's got those mucklucks. I've had those in my cart since the beginning of the pandemic. And again, I think that you'll all make fun of me if I wear like knee-high like moccasins.
Yeah, you're right.
But-
Yeah, you're
wear
right.
it, man. I fucking love it. Do
So
it.
we've got John, I think, is rocking the T-shirt and bow tie most of the time. That seems to be his look.
He wore the same thing
he-
for like the first
and he
3
says-
episodes.
Yep.
Oh, there's only 3.
He's continuity clothing. He meant to.
Yeah.
Because
We've got
he's
Paul's
just done a movie.
And ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones.
The blue
We've got
bottles.
Paul in his Easter sweater getup with like the yellow shirt and yellow sweater. I think.
Love that.
You know, and then Ringo, the pink patterned button-up or the weird pinstripe blazer. I don't know which one we want to talk about, but
pink floral
what-
button up? That was like
that's the one, right?
Oh, the Missy Elliott coat
Be
at the
that
end.
daring- to be that daring in a sartorial in your fashion choices, you've really got to have a set, or a giant wiener in jeans.
I mean,
He certainly had a set.
the Beatles had some great fashion choices, but I do think that the gold medal has to go to Glenn Johns.
Yeah.
Oh, white
That
coat.
big
White coat.
white coat.
Oh my gosh, his sunglasses, the neckerchiefs. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
To me, he was kind of like the window into the outside music world in that documentary. It was like, okay, that's, Carnaby Street, rest of the music peeking in.
this might
I
be.
think all the guys on this podcast tonight should commit to wearing neckerchiefs again in 2022.
Well,
Do it.
I'm doing the fake bow tie tonight.
Yeah. Tommy,
I got
Tommy has
nervous
a
when
dick
you said
sound that we
commit.
maybe
I
haven't
love
been
that.
able to see all night. But
Yeah, my microphone's been covered.
Sharp, I like it.
Was anyone else?
Sorry,
was
Cam.
anyone else upset with the fact that the Twickenham sessions were just dominated by turtleneck sweaters and waistcoats with t-shirts? I'm like, oh, someone get them a heater, like so they can wear something cool, Sorry.
I think that someone said something about them reading the magazine about their
Beatles
the
book.
write-ups
Yeah.
about them. They were pretty
zine.
freaking obsessed about what people wrote about them.
Yeah.
that is true.
I thought that was rather
Drugs,
interesting.
divorce,
Yeah.
and a splitting image.
Yeah, I mean, they joked
Slipping
about it
image.
and they didn't take it too seriously, but I can't imagine reading what someone writes about me. I would.
Do you not read your podcast reviews?
No, thank fucking God.
Scotty.
You
Scotty
should
can't
read
even
the
get
one I
online.
left.
We don't know. Scotty doesn't know anything about like this.
Sam reads your podcast reviews, and he has some thoughts about it.
Is it a bad thing to ask? But does anybody know what's going on with Glenn Johns' like nail? It's like black.
Oh yeah, he's got a bad nail.
Oh no!
That's what it seemed
Bang
like.
bang!
Yeah.
I'm moving that anvil around.
God damn it,
Mal was ever enthusiastic.
Well, I know of the Coke nail. Maybe that was just to make it more visible,
Well, it's like I
in
don't.
case he forgets.
He's
Well,
not Carrie
I don't know.
Fisher.
It did look like something got dropped and it was like bleeding under the
Yeah,
nail.
yeah.
But I was just
He had
didn't
a-
know. I like,
rough
dude, I
time.
found myself googling like Glenn John's nail.
Under my
Like,
thumb.
He was probably like, they're never
This
going to
is
have the
abstract, I
high
dig it.
definition in the future to see this. They're only shooting in 16 millimeter. There's no way.
Speaking of 16 millimeter in high definition.
Yeah. Did you see
I
what
need to
Ringo
get
was
this out
saying?
of the
Ringo,
way.
yeah.
I have to say this, and I'll probably be the only one who will, dock the film points for this. But halfway through part 2, I kind of noticed something looked off with the footage, and it took me a minute to figure out what it was. And it's clearly some sort of AI upscaling denoise filter. And once I noticed that, I couldn't unnotice it, and it was really distracting.
I had a little bit
I
of
want
what you're
to,
talking
yeah.
about.
So one of the things that when I went to the premiere and they had the cut, the Peter Jackson cut playing, and he sort of like talked us through his process. That is actually, one of the things that he talked about, because there was a lot of AI used to decipher like the studio chatter that you couldn't really hear it, in the original footage. So a lot of that was really upscaled. That's why I noticed it too, Ethan, where, some of the footage was meant to match the words, but it didn't. And I think that's probably wise, because they did use like robots to tell what they were talking about and to apply that, to amplify that stuff more, which I think is
Some
Yeah.
scenes, it's like you could really... It seemed like they had like glassy eyes, and they were made out of plasticine. Like, it looked weirdly
Plasticine
smooth
quarters.
at points.
Yeah.
With looking glass ties.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the smoothing, I mean, you kind of have to strike a balance between blowing it up to be able to be seen on today's televisions, and with the cropping you have to do for, widescreen format, with trying to keep it natural. And I think for the most part they did that.
Yeah.
I felt like there were a bunch of issues in part 1, actually. I thought part 1 was the worst as far as, noticing video things where, right, like you were saying, the audio and the video were out of sync, and I think that was because they were recorded separately, and the video tend to get out of sync much faster than the audio. I'm not sure why that wasn't fixed. I don't know enough about this stuff, but it seemed like it went away after Twickenham, so maybe it was just a sad Twickenham thing.
They needed 6 years to do it. Yeah.
They should have gotten Magic Alex on there.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
It's not
I
as
felt
bad
like it was
as-
a bit of a
yeah.
compromise. There were some funky spots in there where I was like, oh, clearly they're like inserting frames or doing whatever. I don't have the technical prowess to say they're doing, but I think that's why they hired Peter Jackson, right? Like he had just redone like this World War I footage stuff. And I think that's part of why he got this gig. I know that he's like a Beatles fan, but I think really he got this gig because he had restored footage in a way that probably they thought some other shops couldn't have done. Like it wasn't just Peter Jackson's, the fact that he has this entire film studio that had done all of this work in Lord of the Rings and has like the computer processing power that Peter Jackson has at his disposal is why he's processing this footage, I think.
I'm pretty sure Andy Serkis in motion capture played Paul McCartney at one point. I can't confirm that.
My precious.
I don't remember
Get back.
when Beatles Rock Band came out, and there was a commercial that kind of like showed them crossing Abbey Road and doing that whole thing.
Yep.
And there's this one shot of it, or in it, of John, where
John.
he turns to the camera and he's like got this big smile and what looks like the most fake glued-on beard. That shot is in.
No.
I think in the third episode.
Thank
I
you.
was like,
Thank
I know
you.
That face. I know that face from somewhere. It's that creepy face where they like glue on fake beard to like CGI early '69 John. It's really strange. And, like that was kind of.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
I noticed that too.
Oh.
But someone else
I'm not
did.
the only one.
I forgot about that commercial, and that was a nightmare.
It's really.
Yeah,
That was creepy.
I need to do a Rock Band episode at some point because I
want to do
100%
I want to do a podcast off where we play each other in Rock Band.
Whoa.
A Beatles
So
Rock Band.
I had the Hofner, and then I leant the head against a radiator that was on, and then I came back about an hour later, and it entirely melted.
No good.
Did anyone else wonder during the show why Yoko Ono has so much paperwork to work through? Like she's constantly like opening envelopes and like writing stuff and reading and like
The divorce?
you think it's that lengthy of a paperwork.
She's got correspondence.
It's a
man.
divorce.
A lot of paperwork.
Yep.
Been divorced.
Apparently.
I also
She's got a lot of blank pages to write yes on, but
Oh, no.
really, really small.
Oh, did anyone say there was two good Paul McCartney Yoko jokes? There was one when Linda made a suggestion, and he goes, "All right, Yoko,"
Yeah.
which was,
Oh,
was
yeah,
really
yeah,
funny.
that's
And then there was one like, "Look, after this, John, you're just going to be in a black bag somewhere." You know, like it was
yeah.
really, really flippant. It was very funny.
That Linda moment is right around when, again, that phony Michael Lindsay Hogg is talking about what a fan he is of the Beatles. And she's
Yes, and she's like, "You wanna make it better?"
I'm a
Yeah, yeah.
fan. And he's like, well, I'm a bigger fan than you are. He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what, do you want to fight about it right
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
Which
Get
I
him further
love.
down.
That's a
come
funny one.
on.
I loved that.
Linda was great in her
Yeah.
small parts. Like I fell in love with her even more. I really did.
Right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, she had one of my favorite things with Heather and Paul in part 3, where Linda was describing Heather like coming home one night. It's like, I think I'm gonna eat for about 3 hours, and then I'll go to bed around 1. And then Paul's like, "No, you're just going right back in your books."
yeah. Time to go. Yeah.
Speaking of Linda, like we see a bunch of her photos, and then it shows the photo on screen. Did Ethan Russell get one of those moments as well? Like one, possibly.
I think so.
Yeah.
I got a couple, yeah.
Yeah.
When they first got to Apple, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because they showed, he took the photograph of, I believe, John. Let me look at the Let It Be cover. Hang on. Yeah, John in the Apple studio. And they showed that on, like, in a montage of his pics, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were they
Everyone
not?
got their fair shake in this. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think they even mentioned the book.
Yeah, a couple
Get Back
times.
book.
Yeah.
That came with the original record.
I loved all the cameos of people in the Beatles world. Like Robert Fraser comes in there, and I'm like, oh, that's what he looks like, you know, and Dennis O'Dell, and just all these people that I've, read about over the years, but I've never actually seen their faces or heard their voices. I wish we could have heard Maureen talk a little bit. Like, I'd love to hear her voice.
Yeah.
Patty
with
was
Patty,
doing it for
yeah.
a hot second,
Just real quick, yeah.
I wish we
She
could
was
have
in
heard
the middle
Alan.
of leaving George.
Yeah, I wish we could have heard Alan Klein because it probably would have been like, "Oh, hello, Beatles," something like that. You know,
Well, your Alan
mustache.
Klein sounds like John Lovett.
Watch John Belushi and the Ruddles.
I know. I was just gonna say
Like,
that, Jonathan. It's like forever. Like those two will be intrinsically linked in my mind.
Right.
It's like John Belushi is Alan Klein.
I will get the Beatles
it.
$1 billion.
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you monkeys too.
Pesky, yeah.
I found the section where John was talking to Glenn about Alan Klein, and Glenn was like very diplomatic about, like, you could tell he was like, I have nothing good to say about this man,
Yeah.
but so I have to be like gentle.
He says
Yeah.
you are who you are.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
he was saying it, and he
He-
was saying that
Alan?
Alan doesn't talk to John the way
same
he
way he
talks
talks
to
to
other
Glenn.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That
I
is
thought that was like a really interesting
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, look at him being like very diplomatic and careful about what he's saying.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And John was not taking the bait. He was like, he's a weird guy. He's a weird guy. He's like, well, aren't we all weird in our own
Yeah.
way? Great. Let's
Yeah.
go.
But even
I think-
even Yoko is super on board when they're talking about it. She's like, he owns part of MGM and that kind of stuff. Like they were so
Well-
sold in. Like whenever he had come in and
Because that-
pitched them, like they were on board.
Because
you know?
what
Cue Ron Howard narration. This would be important later.
Well, just side note, what he did, he was so cunning about this kind of stuff. When he met John and Yoko, he did a lot of research on Yoko, and he focused on Yoko, which made both John and Yoko really obsessed with him.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
he did it. He really engineered that relationship.
And speaking of that, Yoko. So what I always think is funny is that the John stuff where he sings vocals about Yoko. Like I think it's funny to sort of just be just saying your sort of spouse's or significant other's name or whatever, and then they're doing that jam, and Yoko sings John's name during some part of it, and I thought that was super fucking cool. Like that reciprocity of this thing that I was like, okay, this is just something that they were into, I guess. You know, like I hate when I see a relationship dynamic. I hate when I see a relationship dynamic that feels like just off or whatever, but there's something here that just felt like full like reciprocity in that sort of moment that I was like, all right, that's really cool, you know.
I think,
and maybe I'm missing a ton of
Isn't that a
Yoko work
Police
that she's saying
album?
John or whatever, but I'm unfamiliar with it, you know.
I think
Yeah,
Yoko
sure.
was treated very judiciously in this. I think that was that's probably one of the best parts of this documentary because there was not even a shade of like tongue-in-cheekness at Yoko, despite the odd Paul comment. But that was sort of like he would say it to her face. And in fact, he did say it, like you're going to be a black bag somewhere. And John and Yoko were there, so it's like I felt like I liked how she was respected. In this doc, and it sort of counteracted that stereotype of Yoko breaking up the Beatles because she didn't even really talk that much. And to be fair, that could have been Yoko vetoing some footage that maybe would have,
I was going to say,
I
methinks
thought-
that may have been by design.
I thought that was the one place where the whitewashing was a little bit too much in that it did seem like there was this thing. Like, if they've kept in Paul saying to Linda, all right, Yoko, there should be something in the documentary that shows why he would say that. And if there wasn't, because she was so silent and she was so not a contributor to the greater Beatles ethos in the way even Linda was. And I thought maybe that was a little bit of an overcorrection, but I understand why
Well,
they
the only
did
hint,
it.
the only
Yeah.
hint of it is after that meeting, the second meeting with George, where Linda and Yoko go, and it sounds like that becomes more about John and Yoko than it does George's contribution to the band, right? And that's where Paul's kind of, even in the moment, being very, I don't know if we want to say diplomatic or correcting or understanding of his friend, being like, well, this is their relationship, and if we want him to be in the band, this is kind of where we are, right? And that we have to make room, and that they love each other and all that. So
Yeah, see, I think that's
it
like
seems very
modern.
genuine too.
yeah,
Yeah,
he does.
I don't know. I'm very leery. I'm the first person to be like the worst person to tell Beatles history is Paul. Like now, I don't. You know, he candy coats shit so much, and that's where it's like, okay, well, what did he cut out? And he decided to leave that in the footage to make himself look better at that point, rather than actually reflect.
Fair
what
enough.
was going on
Yeah,
historically.
yeah.
Whoa. Yeah.
Because we know
So
that,
they-
you know,
how
there,
much-
there are letters that exist from, you know, Paul to John where he calls her like racial slurs. So, and that's just a thing that exists. So it's not
Is
all
there-
like, oh, I stand John and Yoko. Like that's not Paul at that point.
Yeah.
100%.
What is the what is the what was Paul or Ringo's input on this Get Back thing? Did anybody know?
They were the executive producers. So,
But what does that mean? Is that just like money?
no,
Yeah.
well, you know, with Apple, they sort of, they can veto, they can, you know, they really have
Okay.
executive power
Yeah.
over everything. I would imagine they had to okay the footage.
But I heard Jackson was working on this
Yeah.
even like 10, 12 days ago, finishing up final cuts.
That's true.
Before they were uploaded, you know?
That's true.
Which-
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, all things said, like, I don't want to take anything away from the John or Yoko thing. It is funny to be a band of brothers and all of a sudden have Yoko sitting right next to John and being right in the mix of things. Like, would you rather, like, if we all had to go to our jobs tomorrow, would you rather be doing your job with Yoko sitting 6 inches away from you, or would you rather be doing it with two Hare Krishnas staring at you from sort of a little bit further of a distance?
I think the context of the job makes it very different. And, you know, when you're in a creative enterprise as opposed to like an office job like any of us have, it's very different what you can and can't do. And also, you know, the context of time for them, they're only a month past Yoko having a miscarriage. And because of that, you know, they're dealing with the trauma of that. Then whatever trauma comes up naturally through the holidays is amplified by the loss they've experienced, which is being further amplified by increased drug use. By the time they have to report to work, I kind of get the idea of like, I want this person here because we're dealing with this together.
Sure.
And at the same time,
Fuck
Linda's
yeah.
there and Maureen is there almost as much as Yoko, at least on camera.
Yeah.
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 Maybe
Yeah.
they're not as involved in this circle, but they're also not necessarily dealing with the same thing. So I kind of see the want to have that togetherness where maybe like that's not the best time for them, for John to be at like his most creative availability to some extent.
Yeah.
And Paul may have been, this is just speculation, but Paul may have been even more sensitive because Linda was at that time a couple of months pregnant with Mary.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Whether or not, I'm not sure if it was late enough that they knew yet, but probably they did. And so there's another layer of, you know, let's give this guy some room and some sensitivity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another, on the subject of conception, I just want to bring up too, that at some point during this Let It Be session during this month, Giles Martin was
That's why Jordan
I had
is
to.
so cool.
Speaking of conception, back to Ringo's genes.
Yeah. For real.
Well, actually, speaking of conception, I thought it was quite interesting in the end credits. Zach Starkey was thanked, Sean was thanked, Danny was thanked, but there was no Julian thanked, and there was no McCartney kids thanked either. So I was like, oh, okay. I wonder what their involvement was compared to the other kids that weren't involved.
Interesting.
I don't think Julian has much involvement in the estate issues. I think Sean's been so ingrained in it. I'd have to imagine Julian's just kind of like, you handle it, you do your, because also Sean's got to deal with his mother as well, and she's in the film. So, and she and Julian have had their issues over the years. So, Sean kind of becomes the diplomatic person. Zach, I think, is he the youngest of the Starkey boys? At least? Is there another boy after? I know there's a younger daughter.
Yeah.
There's
Zach
another.
is,
There's
Zach is
another
the
boy
oldest.
too.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Zach,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I'd be curious to know why he's the one. Maybe that's
maybe
involved in it, but
I don't know, because like you said, Jonathan, maybe it involves like both of his parents. I don't know, Maureen. With Sean, I think because Yoko's health is not great right now, and I know that they were quarantining together during the pandemic. Like he would talk about that on his Instagram and stuff. He was like caretaking for her. I'm sure he did a lot of the like back and forth business kind of thing with the film. I would imagine, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That's just
easy if you
conjecture.
try.
I don't know.
One thing I don't think we brought up yet, that set list, the incomplete rooftop concert, had so many more numbers on them, partly from Abbey Road, what would become Abbey Road. What did you guys think about that set list? And do you think it would have changed anything about the future had they debuted some of these other songs in public? Like songs even like Teddy Boy that didn't make it on a Beatles album ever.
Well, you're looking like
just
Road to
wouldn't have heard
Marrakesh, and you're like, that was a complete song, you know? Like, and I know it's not a rocker or whatever, but yeah, same idea.
No, but you just wouldn't have heard them. You wouldn't have heard For You Blue if George had decided to play that. Teddy Boy would be like, what? Turn it up! You know, it's the same reason why there's no piano ballads up there. You can't get the piano up there. I think it's more of a practical reason more than anything. But like, if they going back to the Beatles rock band, in that they play "I Want You, She's So Heavy" on the rooftop level. Like, if they'd have done that, like, oh my god, the noise complaints would have come in even stronger as well. Just bow, 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 bow.
Am I allowed to throw out another completely unrelated
Always. Ethan, you have carte blanche tonight.
thing?
Ethan's here.
Oh yeah, the timeline kind of would have worked out. What if instead of Billy Preston, what if Graham Nash, fresh out of the Hollies, joined the Beatles? Think about that next time you're high.
Thanks, Ethan.
Whoa, dude! Like, what if Graham Nash?
Road to Marrakesh Express.
Jesus.
I do have just about a serious question, and that is, can someone explain to me the timeline of George's mustache? Because he leaves the band with a little bit of scruff, but I believe he's shaved on that last day, if I remember correctly from episode 1. And he comes back with a full mustache, and this is not making a lot of sense to me. Like,
Come on,
4,
Tommy.
5 days later. What's
Tommy, you fart
Look,
and you get
Tommy,
a fucking
whatever you
beard.
want me to grow, I'll do it. Okay?
He must have been a hair growing
I
beast
know.
because, I mean, when was the Abbey Road pictures taken? He
He's
could
that?
have braided
Fair
that beard
point.
that he had.
There's nothing you can grow that can't be grown. All you need is scruff.
give me a second. Hang on.
No, let's move on quick before Sam thinks of something.
No,
For me, the biggest thing that I think that I've just been sort of like plowing over George Martin and all of this stuff is like an album and all these things is the product of everyone who's been participating, and whether it's the tenseness in the room or whatever it is, like it's not just the Beatles, it's everyone who's touching it that's really impacted. And I thought that was really interesting to see. And even Michael Lindsay Hogg has to deal with this, right? Like he's got a job to do and he's there with the Beatles sorting it out. And so his cut of Let It Be is also the emotional weight of having been in the mix of it. Like call it whatever you want. But Peter Jackson gets the luxury of not having any of that, right? Who gets like a surplus of footage and gets to make a film, you know? But thinking about the White Album and all this stuff, like I always give George Martin grief where he's like, I had to take a vacation. I had to do this and that. But like, of course you did. Like you're in the mix of it as much as anyone else. And so it's the environment that makes all of these albums, whether the Beatles were getting along or not, or whatever we want to say about behind the scenes. And so I really took that away from seeing this a lot. You know, that was kind of my wrap up on Get Back.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, man. And it echoes a lot of what I'm feeling, which is, what if they just waited till after the Magic Christian? What would have happened, and how different would this have felt if you're not trying to cram this thing into 3 weeks when people kind of can and can't do it? Jonathan, as you said, like John and Yoko are just coming off this traumatic thing. Ringo's rushing to something else. George talks so many times about how, you know, the doldrums of the Beatles, and that's where they've been the last 18 months. And the White Album is not that long before this, right? Like it had just come out a week or two before they start.
It came out in
these
November
sessions.
22nd.
November.
Okay,
like
so
a
a month or two before, yeah. So, you know, and they're kicking these sessions right into gear. And like, what if they just gave a little more breathing room to the band to be themselves before they came back together? Like coulda, woulda, shoulda, I guess. But
Ringo was a changed man after the Magic Christian.
Makes a lot of sense.
I will provide no further comment.
Peter Sellers,
Does it
help me
have to do
finish.
with his penis?
Oh, can we just talk about
comment.
the moment when George is helping him with the octopus one?
Yeah.
That was the best way to start that.
I love that.
part
I
three.
really
I
love
do
that
too.
moment. That George Harrison was like, "Oh, all right, if you do this or that, And it also shows Ringo as an interesting musician in his own right, that he's playing piano on some of this stuff. Like, I think this is glossed over, the fact that he's contributed at all to this. Like, he's almost bringing this to the band in the way the rest of them are bringing tunes. And then
He's almost a Beatle.
And then George Martin comes over, and it's like the first thing you see George Martin get interested in the whole show so far. He's like, "Oh, maybe we could do this or that."
Well, he
I
throws
don't
the
do
backup
impressions.
vocals right in there too. Like,
Yeah. And so it's like, I love that moment.
It's crazy though how the Beatles, like I still mentioned earlier, that they aren't just these gods, and they, when talking about Get Back, they have like practical, normal conversations about how we're going to do this. How many solos and chorus verses are we going to have in this? What note should we play here? I'm like, they can't just have these conversations. Paul said it was all magic and it all came together. My world is crashing around me.
Yeah,
But
that
Boys, I think you have another hit on your hands here.
Yeah.
The song about the octopus is crackerjack.
Yeah. It was so much more practical than I ever imagined it would be. I thought it was mostly just, Lennon saying they were all telepathic and stuff. It was like, no, they had conversations and they talked it out very clinically and like professional musicians doing a job. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and also like they,
Well said.
Paul talks about nervousness and how they do their best when their backs are against the wall, like that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of us, I certainly do, especially at this point in their career, just think that they just did it and they felt like they were gods. But they really did not buy their own bullshit. You can hear that the whole time, especially when they're reading the articles and they're sort of making fun of stuff, and they are just guys. I loved it when I think George Martin told John to turn down his bass, and I was like, the only person who could tell him that is probably George Martin. But it's just
I almost kind of disagree with you on that, if I can interject, because I feel
no,
like
you can't disagree with me. What the hell, Jonathan?
What the heck, Jonathan?
Not acceptable. Are you guys gonna let this happen? I was
Did you not read? Yeah.
Jonathan, this is Allison from BC the Beatles, all right?
Oh,
Who do you think
my
ranking the-
God.
George Martin, you can just tell her to turn down her opinion.
Ranking the Beatles, sit down.
I was told by Sam Wells that we're the darlings of the Beatles podcast. I don't know what all this heat is.
There's an industry? Wow. I didn't know that.
And we're not invited. Yeah.
Hey, you're talking to the fourth most popular Beatle podcast host in Canada, who is not currently recording a show.
The thing I kept thinking about during this whole thing was they started this project with a deadline with no idea what the fuck they were going to do, what songs they were going to play, what the actual end goal was. And that's the biggest example of hubris I could think of. They were just it's gonna work out. Who does that? Who hires a film crew? Hires a film studio? All this stuff is just guys, no one thought to make a checklist or what is the goal? Is everyone on board for the goal?
Yeah,
I
They're
was thinking,
fucking.
did we not talk about this beforehand? That was kind of my overarching thought is no one signed off on any of this, and it's there was no conversation, and that kept driving me crazy as someone who's been a band leader in different forms. There was no are we all on board for this? Do we all want to do this? Okay, what are we making? This is the thing. Cool. Okay, here's how we'll do it. It was just we're gonna show up and do a thing for a month. It's gonna be great.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let's play Blue Suede Shoes for a bit.
they were spoiled brats. I'm not to be rude or whatever, but anything they wanted, they got. Everyone's bowing at their, they're looking back at the cops oh, we're so badass. It's come on,
Well, let's
really,
be honest,
if you were
I mean,
nobodies, you'd get your ass beat. You'd be all fucked up right now.
When the cops show up,
you're
it's
so
fucking-
privileged. I don't know. I got a little bit of that where they were very spoiled. Anything you ask for, and it's just too easy for them.
Yeah.
I think that. I
Now,
mean,
but
that,
I think
that
this speaks also to to Brian's death again, though, and their lack of a leader, and, you know, there should be somebody who's doing this, and you should never contract a film director who isn't, you don't have an agreement about what film you're fucking making before you actually start shooting.
Correct.
But they didn't think about it.
Why'd they bring in the guy who, like, made their videos for Top of the Pops, and not, like, people who actually made documentaries about them, like the Maisel brothers?
Yeah, but also, I mean, you could apply that, Ethan, to like, why did they bring in Peter Jackson to fix this, you know, or to release this to the public? I think that's always like this interesting decision, right? Like, we're not respecting Peter Jackson because of his documentary work, you know. So,
I don't know. Why is the sky blue?
It's all for money, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
This is the Beatle industry.
I thought it was because it makes me cry, but that's...
No,
Sam,
this is all for money.
Have British police or what do you call them? You call them bobbies? Have they got any more intimidating?
We call
than
them
that
pigs, man. We call them pigs.
What? That 17-year-old boy they send to Apple to be like, can you turn this down? You know.
And why are their chin straps across the front of their chins?
You gotta like lick them off of
he's just like chewing on it.
How is that
like
holding your hat on?
So it's still a law here in the UK that if a pregnant woman needs to urinate publicly, she can ask a policeman to use his helmet.
Really?
What?
That's actually a thing. It may have been repealed, but like that was a law here in the UK.
Not.
So no wonder they've always got a bad look on their face. But they do send a couple of 10-year-olds to go break this up. Like, excuse me, Mr. Matt Evans, could you turn it down, please? Yeah, sure. I'll just wait here. If there's like an American cop, the receptionist would be killed. She'd be shot dead. They would have kicked the door down. There would have, it would have been a massacre at Apple Studios. But oh my, it doesn't make.
I also like that
look
it takes him like 90 minutes to realize they're on the roof. He's like, I thought recording studios were soundproofed.
And then she goes, "Don't go on the roof because it'll fall in." Okay, I'll believe you. Like,
there's too many people up there.
His idea was to build this super inconspicuous box.
Oh yeah, that everyone recognizes when they walk in.
Thing, so the camera can. Who's the one in the box filming?
Yeah,
for real.
They missed the whole show.
Magic Alex.
Someone who got a bonus that Christmas, definitely.
AI.
You hope.
I guess I don't have a sense, and they don't really show, but how loud can they really be playing? Like, I did not see an epic PA or anything like that. Clearly, people are disturbed by it, but like, it's not like they were playing it
from my sleep, and I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, why was that woman sleeping at this time? Like, that should be a plus. Like, it wasn't a normal time to be sleeping.
Yeah. These Monty Python pepper pots.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
No,
Guys,
I love
did
how
we
many
have
old people. There were so many older people that seemed to love the Beatles back then, which was really quite refreshing.
Yeah, for real.
They're right. Yeah.
They're a good bunch of lads.
My kids buy the records. Yeah.
I thought the hero of the whole piece was that one cab driver. It's like, yeah, it's great, isn't it?
What?
I'd like to hear from that policeman. Now.
Yeah.
I wonder if this followed him.
I read that Peter
50
Jackson
by now.
interviewed them. He said that he went and spoke with all of them, but I don't know what that meant for the purpose of the podcast, or not for the documentary. But I guess he did.
Can I dox you on the documentary?
Hoping that's all bonus fitted. I would love to hear. I'd love to see interviews with those officers.
Yes.
Jimmy the doorman, Debbie the receptionist. I want to hear like their recountings of the day. I would love to hear that.
This is the talking head shit we want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Something separate, like you said.
I don't
like
need
a separate
Questlove.
piece.
Like I love Questlove. I don't need Questlove or Dave Grohl or any of them people. Like, give me those people.
Why did it seem like you could just...
What about David Byrne?
You could just walk into the Apple offices then. Everyone is just like opening the door. Like you could just go up the stairs
But they knocked.
and open
The cops
door.
fucking knocked still.
Yeah.
They were like, knock.
Come in.
There are those girls that enter the Apple studios and they walk past. And like John just walks past them and like, this is so pre 9/11. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Was that a subtitle?
I believe in
like
the English.
This is the
cut,
recording. Like this is the recording that appeared on Let It Be. This is a pre 9/11 world.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of hubris, how about how George just leaves his car parked out there?
Yes.
illegally?
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
He locks everything up. Yeah.
That's that moment,
Apple's
right?
hemorrhaging money, but he ain't paying that parking ticket. every week.
Baby, you can drive my car. There we go.
Took you half an hour, Sam.
That
On
joke
that note,
was hell
I
on
mean,
wheels. Yeah.
I know we could talk about this forever, and
Yeah.
we all have venues to do that, which I think is great. But do we feel
Some
like
of us
we
already
talked about
have.
Get Back tonight?
Feel like
I got back to it.
I
Any
Yeah.
final comments? Anything we need to say on this documentary?
It's all right.
Well, before we go, everyone, with all that said, I would love it if everyone could go around and kind of say where people can find your pods or you all on social. As this will be on the Blotto Beatles feed at the very least. And so, as people know, I hope you can find us at Blotto Beatles on all socials, and please download the Blotto Beatles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Allison and Erica, where can people find BC the Beatles?
We are at BC the Beatles everywhere. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at BeatlePeedle on Instagram and Twitter.
Oh, and I guess what Erica said, our podcast, but I am a Jobo Agogo, and that's very complicated, but if you search AJOBO, probably come up. Everywhere.
Sam, what about in the world of Paul or Nothing?
You can find me by typing in two legs. No, not two legs. You can find me by Paul or Nothing, Paul McCartney Pod at gmail.com, at McCartney Pod on Twitter, and check out Mac It in Your Attic on YouTube as well. I'm trying to plug that as well.
Hey.
Ethan Alexanian, how about you?
I'll plug Mac in your attic because I
You
was
were,
on it,
yeah.
and
I saw
I get money out of it occasionally.
Ethan does the thumbnails. They are excellent. They are.
So George.
Yeah, I used to do a podcast. I may do it again. I'll probably do it again. Fans on the
There we
Run.
go.
You can find it places. I'm currently working on a book about the Let It Be sessions.
Right on.
It's told in a first-person narrative perspective from. Did you guys remember the Fly on the Wall
Yes.
disc from Let It Be Naked?
Yeah.
It's from the perspective of the fly. And he's flying around Apple, and he's on Mal Evans' head. And I've already got a publishing deal. It's gonna, steal. It's gonna outsell the McCartney lyrics book.
Dude, I love it.
I do too.
That's awesome.
I'm going to buy it.
And we're gonna have Ethan back real soon because we have a lost episode with him where he was drinking spiked Snapples, which we don't know anything about in the United States. But stay tuned for more of that.
Yeah. And last but not least, our OG pod pals, Jonathan and Julia. What's up with you guys?
Oh, goodness. You can find everything we do at rankingthebeatles.com on all your podcast providers. And on social media, we're on Facebook at
Ranking the Beatles.
Instagram at
Ranking the Beatles.
and Twitter at
Ranking Beatles.
because they have a character limit like a bunch of dicks. But yeah,
Like a bunch of Ringo
Ringo
fans.
A couple of Ringo stars.
we have a
That's how we
Ringo
measure
Instagram
everything in the
account that's
Beatles podcast world.
Quickly getting banned from all social media.
Awesome. Thank you
I just
for hanging
I
with
just
us.
wanted a bit. I just farted.
I did too. But after October 24th, no more farting.
Well, this seems like a great
I'm farting with peace and love.
It does seem
Peace and love.
like a great place to leave off for all of us. And I think together we could probably all say, I think we probably all end our podcast this way. Am I right? Peace and love, everyone. This was a blast.
Peace
It was
and love.
awesome to have you.
Peace.
I
and
do not end my podcast that way. Don't speak for me.